I'm the Scale Model Geek, and in this video is a little project that I've been wanting to do for a little while now. I've been a member of this website called Loot for a couple of years now, and when I saw this samurai figure, I knew what I wanted to do with it. For this project, I needed the best printer that I have in my arsenal, and it's the HEYGEARS ULTRACRAFT Reflex RS Turbo. So let's get started with the project. Now I'm using the proprietary software that comes with HEYGEARS, which is the Blueprint Studio. Very straightforward to use. All we need to do is create a new project. Then we select the printer that we're actually using. Like I said, it's the ULTRACRAFT RS Turbo. Next step is we choose any add-on modules, which I don't have any. We're using a basic application, and then we pick the resin that we're using. I have the PAP10, which gives me some great details in the print. Then you choose the layer thickness, what type of quality you're after, and I'm after the 30 ohms or ohms, whatever it is. I then head over and import the figurine. Loot do supply both pre-supported and unsupported files. I chose the unsupported because I want to try and minimize the amount of supports that I use, because Loot kind of goes overboard a bit. So once the figurine is imported, we just adjust our angles there. Normally at this point I just hit auto support then generate, but in this case I'm going to change the contact diameter from 0.4 to 0.2. This is a 75mm figure, so I want to try and get that as small as possible to create as little sanding as possible later on. As you can see, it does a great job on calculating those supports, and I have total confidence I'm not going to have any failures. Here I'm just moving the figurine over to the side a bit because I need to import the head and also create supports for that piece. Loot have been around for a few years now, and they do some really awesome packs. Everything from steampunk right up to zombies. Well, now we've got the supports all sorted out. What we need to do is slice the model, and this calculates the file to send to the printer. HEYGEARS have done an absolutely wonderful job of minimalizing how much work you need to do to get a print. With the slicing all completed, we can head back to the project, and if we need, we can make some more final adjustments and go through the slicing process again if you've changed your mind on anything. What I love about the whole process with HEYGEARS is not only obviously the sheer quality of what I get out of the printouts, but also how easy it is to go through the process from start to finish. After double checking everything, I'm pretty happy with what's happened here. So I'm going to save and quit, and I'm going to leave this little window to go into our printing area. Top right hand corner is my most recent sliced file. Once I click on that, the software automatically connects to the printer via Wi-Fi, and then the RS Turbo starts transferring the file to the printer. Currently the software does not control the printer. All you can do is just transfer the file. But what we can do is click on the icon there and can bring up some of the job details that are happening there. In this particular print, you can see it's going to take about 14 hours and 11 minutes. That is incorrect, I can tell you that straight away. The amount of resin we're using is 40 grams. One of the things I would prefer is, as you can see on the left hand side, there's a whole bunch of 3D snapshots of the job. I would prefer that as a 3D, movable object, so you can kind of scroll around it, spin it, and have a good look. But it is what it is. This is the bottle resin I'm using, which is the production PAP10 in ash grey, and they have literally got the best feed system that you can possibly design. This simply works on gravity, so there's no pumps to fail or piping, hosing to jam up. I love the simplicity. Right, let's head over to the printer, hit on job list, and you can see there we've got our little details again. Again, it says 14 hours, incorrect. And once we hit print, it checks the environment, that's the temperature, and then it starts warming up the resin. Yes, it's got an inbuilt heater. And the build plate comes down and literally mixes the resin while it's heating up. Great idea. And now the accurate reading of the print time comes up, including 2900 layers there. So 8 hours and a few minutes later, we have our print. And look at that, no failures. In fact, I've never had a failure with HEYGEARS. This printer always gives me great results. You can see the detail there in the arm of the Neo Samurai, or Neon Samurai. You know what, I might call it just a Neo, as in new. The facial details are superb there. Just love the quality of that. Of course, there's a little bit of cleaning up to do. There's some excess supports there in some really tricky places that I kind of just chop off with the hobby knife. A little bit of sanding there on the cape. And to attach the head to the body, I used a bit of super glue and filled up the seam with a bit of UV resin and just hardened it with that UV torch. To make handling of the figurine during the painting process a little bit easier, I just super glue it to that little base there. And then off camera, I gave a bit of black primer. I did a couple of very light coats with some Rust-Oleum and then left it overnight to dry. Now I'm doing some Zenithal lining and I'm using some of this acrylic ink from Liquitex, titanium white, couple drops into an airbrush, and I spray from one direction. This gives me all the highlights and creates a whole bunch of shadows for me as well. One of the things I've been doing for years in my painting process, I've been using this sheet of plate glass. I just put a couple drops of paint on the glass. When I finish using it and it's all dry, I just scrape it off and I'm ready to go again. For the base colour for the skin, I'm using some of this beige red. And what I always do with my figurines is I block in all the base colours first. I then go in and start adding all my highlights. My apologies, this part of the process I forgot to hit the record button when I painted the face. So, oops. After a bit of research into samurai warriors, I kind of thought I might stick to the palette of black, red and gold. I think this will give it an awesome neo-imperialistic look to it. Once I blocked in all my colours off camera, I gave it a base coat of some clear matte varnish, just to seal everything in and protect it for my next steps. Here I'm using a lighter shade of the red to bring out some of the highlights, then a very dark grey to also bring out some of the highlights in the cape and the black areas. This gold is the best looking gold I've ever had, and this particular tin of the Model Masters is like 25 years old, no longer made, so I'm very frugal on how I use it. And there it is, almost there. Still got to do the legs and the arms. You know what, I might call this Samurai Gary. This is some dry brushing paint from Ammo, and this particular colour is gunmetal. Now I'm just painting the sword sheath and bring out some of the detail in that area. To add a bit of depth in the recess areas, I'm using some of this Tamiya panel line accent colour, and this really should bring out the detail in the gold areas. Now that Gary's all done, let's move on to the base. For the background of this little vignette, I had an idea of creating the sun out of a piece of 3mm MDF. And I'm just using my laser to cut out the shape, which looks like a little paddle. And that little tab at the bottom was what I used to adhere to the base. Off camera, I gave it a bit of undercoat and then painted it red. I then had the idea of putting a warrior symbol made out of brass onto that sun. So I jumped online, typed in Japanese warrior symbol and found a whole bunch of different styles of it. Now I kind of like that one in the middle there, the top middle, because it looks a little bit chunkier. So I clicked on that and just downloaded it to my PC. The piece of brass I'm using will be from K&S Precision Metals, and the thickness I'll be going for is the 0.002. Brass is sadly not the cheapest stuff to buy. For the next part of the project, I'll be using my monport GQ 50W fibre laser. First thing I need to do is import that image into Lightburn, which is the software I use with the fibre laser. I then head to Tools, then Trace, and that automatically outlines the symbols there of the image. At the moment it's got two symbols there, so I need to delete the bottom one. So first thing I do is I highlight the traced image, I then ungroup it and then delete the areas I don't want. I need to center that image, so next step is I head up to Arrange, then down to Move Selected Object, then move to Page Center. So far this whole build is going quite smoothly. So for the next step of this process, I need to obviously switch on the machine. We switch on the galvo power to the unit, and then the main switch, which is a safety switch on there. Off camera, I frame the cut to make sure everything's aligned. Then I hit the start button and off we go. This monport fiber laser makes really easy work out of this. You can see it's like a hot knife cutting through butter. If anything, I probably had the settings on the power a little bit too high. Now I did use some masking tape around the brass to stop it from warping, but you can see there's some slight warping there still. And there's the final result. How cool does that look? I'm really happy with that. Really nice and precise as well. To glue that brass cutout onto the back plate, I just used a bit of super glue. I think this sun and the symbol is going to give it a really nice elegant look to the overall vignette. And I think it'll create some nice framing for Gary. Now, onto the actual base. Now I jumped onto a piece of software called Blender, which is available free online, and I created this plinth. Now I wanted to give it like a Japanese feel, so I created the lattice on the sides of the plinth. To print that out, I'll be using my BAMBU Labs, and this is the A1 filament printer, and this unit should give me some great results. Now using the software that comes with BAMBU Labs, I import the model, I then adjust the infill, and I only need about 10%. I then head over to supports and just click on the default, which gives me the trees, and that just supports the overhangs at the top there. And then, because I'm going to do a time lapse so you guys can have something to see, I'm just going to head over to the time lapse section and change that from traditional to smooth. And then it creates a little tower there in the back corner. Now since I've made this video, apparently I can adjust it so it doesn't create that tower, because I always thought that was needed for the time lapse. Anyway, something new I've learned. Now I'm happy with the layout there. I head over to slice print, and that calculates it and gives me the files that I need to send to the printer. Now I'm happy with that. It looks pretty good. The areas that need to be supported are supported, and the total print time at this present stage is 3 hours and 34 minutes, and that'll slightly adjust when I head over to print. Now I'm picking a grey filament, and the time will change because I'm using the time lapse, and that adds just a little bit extra time to it. It's now 3 hours and 51 minutes, and I'm using 117 grams of filament. It sent the files via Wi-Fi to the printer. First thing that the A1 does is purge the hot end, just in case there was a different color filament inside the unit. It starts off printing the first layer of that tower, then moves on to the supports and finishes off the rest of those first layer of the whole base. This BAMBU Labs printer is seriously the quickest printer I've ever seen. My very first filament printer I've ever owned was a Kingroon, and this is seriously chalk and cheese. What a difference. Off camera, I gave the base a coat of some Rust-Oleum black primer, and here I'm cutting out a notch so I can fit that back plate to the base. Hindsight being 2020, I probably could have designed a notch straight into the plinth when I originally designed it in Blender. Oh well, you live and learn. This little hobby saw made easy work of cutting that notch out, and then onto a little hobby knife to clean up the notch. You know, looking at this now, I probably could have used a file. To glue the back plate / paddle, just a bit of super glue. Actually, it wasn't a bit of super glue, it was a lot of super glue. Time to paint up that base. I'm using some of this ammo paint. It's a dark brown looking paint, so it's perfect for the lattice areas of that plinth. And once that's all dry, I hit it with some of this earth from ammo as well. It's a very thick dry brushing paint, and I'm just hitting the edges to give me a nice contrast on that timber look. I used some of that gold that I showed you earlier, and I've dry brushed the edges and the little curvy bits there of the plinth. And there it is, it's looking really good. Now for that top of that base, we need to add some terrain. For that, I'm using some of this cork. I've measured the size that I need and just a hobby knife, or rather box cutting knife, to cut out the size that I need. Quick check to see if it's all good. I then use a pair of side cutters or nippers and I rough up the edges. Bit of super glue to place that cork into place. Now we'll have 2 layers of this, so they kind of look like steps. Once the cork is all painted up, it looks really like concrete or stone. For the painting process, I need to first mask off the plinth so that doesn't get any paint on it. I then seal the whole thing with a homemade version of Mod Podge, which is simply PVA glue and some clear matte varnish. It's got to be water based. I gave the terrain a coat of matte black, and then using some of this light grey to bring out the detail. The combination of the broken up cork as well as the dry brushing really makes it look like a damaged rock or a slate, or something along that lines. A few dollops around the base of PVA glue, then sprinkle some static grass on there and some longer lengths of grass as well. And these little terrain details are available from scalemodelgeek.com.au. I'm just adding some grass tufts here, and I've got a couple of different shades just to create a bit of interesting variation there. Once that was all dry, I then took off the masking tape because we're ready to put Gary into place. A couple drops of super glue at the bottom of his feet and he just gets plonked into place. And we're almost there. For the final step, I'm using some of this green stuff world instead of chrome metal, and I'm using that to paint up Gary's katana. And there we have it. The little vignette is all completed. Not bad for, I think it was a 2 or 3 day job. Let's check out the final images. I really enjoy making these little vignettes because it kind of helps me cleanse the palette before I get onto the bigger dioramas. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments. In the meantime, go check out some of my other videos. I'm glad you stuck around to the end. I'll see you in the next one.